back the claim that the government is catering only to one community or religion. The report studies and compares the access to amenities and schemes like LPG, water, and electricity from 2015-16 to 2019-21. And I'm very happy to say that I'm joined by Professor Shamika Ravi today. Madam, my first question to you is, after going through the report, your analysis which has been produced, may I ask you what prompted you to select the data, specifically this data of 20% of the poorest, which you have mentioned in your report, and particularly of NFHS. Why did you make that decision?
Well, Karthika, I think first and foremost, this shrillness which you are seeing amongst the experts through different kinds of ratings, they are based on very small samples. They are based on subjective, these are perception-based interviews of a very small group of people. And, you have to view these exercises because they are methodologically so weak that it's really just politics. This is the opinion of a handful of experts. Though the best way to counter is to first see what does the actual data say in terms of large representativeness of what is happening on the ground in India. So the reason we started to look at the National Family Health Survey is, first, you don't want to look at government data. The administration will say what it says. You want to look at independent data. You want to look at large self-reported data out of the households. So if anything, you will get an underestimate of how much progress has happened. You will not get an overestimate. So I think, first of all, it's important to see it is not government administration data. This is survey data from the National Family Health surveys that we conduct in India. Now, the reason I picked up NFHS is also, first of all, it's large. It has data on amenities and what is available to households. But very importantly, the timeline also becomes useful from this analysis point of view. The last round of the NFHS was held in year 15-16, which is within a year of the Modi establishment taking power in India and governance. And the last round, which is the fifth round, happened between 19 and 21. So the time window is absolutely appropriate. What happened in the beginning? What kind of amenities did the poor have access to? And how have things changed in the last 5-6 years since Modi establishment coming into being? Now, the other thing we do in this data is also, we want to focus on the weakest section. We want to focus on the bottom 20% of the population, because this is the segment of the population which has received many amenities for the first time in their lives and lives of their families. So, in a democracy, since everyone has one vote, the elite can't very easily capture or subvert the wishes of the weakest and the silence the weakest segment of the society. So looking at the weakest and the 20% at the bottom became critical for that reason.
Do you think that there was a narrative which was being built and your report busts it because you have actually addressed the issue of social equity, the delivery systems, Sabka Vikas, the basic facilities to everyone? So your report, if we look into the basic sectors, for example, LPG, if we look at the basic sectors of electricity, it just shows that even the minority, in some cases, they have even benefited more than the majority communities in the districts.
Yeah. So I think very important to highlight that the study is basically, the whole idea of doing this research was, I was really scrutinizing, trying to see, is there any discernible discrimination that I see? And what are the variables or the metrics along which you want to look at discrimination? One which the Modi establishment is often accused by the expert and the elites, and a lot, of course, from these rankers of democracy. It is one on the situation of minorities. So we analyze the data to see what is happening to the bottom 20%, disaggregated by religious groups. That's number one. Second is, you also want to look at social classes. What is happening to SC/STs? You also want to look at geographical clusters, because Karthika, in India, districts are not homogeneous. You do have Muslim majority districts, you do have Christian majority, you have Sikh majority, you have not just majority, but the variation. If you look at the way religions are distributed, we have defined these as different kinds of clusters. Because theoretically, if an administration really does want to discriminate, it's not that difficult to do so, because you know that there is, this particular constituency, that particular block or subdivision or even district doesn't vote for me. So I can keep amenities away, right? So geographical discrimination theoretically is possible and feasible. So it was important to also look beyond religion and social classes, as also seeing how are amenities distributed across geographies and districts and different kinds of religious clusters. And we find absolutely no discernible, there is absolutely no bias. In fact, on several counts, what you just highlighted, electricity is one of them. You can look at water, you look at mobile phone, banking, access to bank accounts, LPG, etc. There is absolutely no discernible difference. In fact, in some places, minorities have actually done a little bit better. So it just tells you that the administration does not discriminate. You can have anecdotes, you can have election hysteria, you can have politics, you will have shrillness in the media. But beyond all of that, as professional economists, we have to look at data and show what the data basically reflects. The data is also very large, by the way. NFHS is pretty large, and across these two rounds, we are covering more than 12 lakh households. So it is fairly representative.
Professor Ravi, do you think, and I'm quoting the lines from your survey, do you think that under Prime Minister Narendra Modi, India is also undergoing number of micro revolutions, which you mentioned, which America went through, when they focused and somehow mended the basic issues of electricity, connectivity, sanitation, housing? Do you think that India is undergoing the same micro revolution? Number of small micro revolutions?
100%. There is no two ways about it, Karthikeyan. In fact, what the Americans witnessed, and in the 1940s, after the war, is a massive infusion of amenities. They really expanded access to amenities for people across economic spectrum, across. What it does is, it paves the way for long-term economic growth. It raises productivity. And you saw that after these investments in amenities, the US economy enjoyed decades of long-term economic growth and prosperity. So what is happening in India is exactly that situation, that we do realize that when you make amenities available universally, and by the way, you heard this in another language when the Prime Minister says saturation, and when he says that all basic amenities to every citizen everywhere, that is what is being attempted here. And of course, in the report, I very clearly highlight that on some amenities, we are doing very well in terms of reaching that saturation. But there are amenities where we have a long way to go still, piped drinking water, even as far as LPG, etc. This is a work in progress. At $2,200 per capita per annum, that is our current standing. We are attempting to do exactly what the PM constantly talks about, which is saturation. But it remains a work in progress. But that is not the objective. Objective here was to see, is there any discernible discrimination in the data? Is there any administrative bias across religious groups, across social groups, or geographical clusters? Another important thing that the US experience showed us, that when you make amenities universal, it also significantly impacts inequality. So what we are poised to achieve through making amenities universal is next several decades of growth in productivity and prosperity for all.
Professor Ravi, where do you feel that these foreign surveys fail? Do these foreign surveys fail because they're dominated by woke politics and just fail to understand our Indian tradition of democracy, which lays great importance on the issue of sabka saath, sabka vikas, about social equality, about social democracy, which Baba Saheb Ambedkar spoke about? Is it that they fail to understand that democracy means a lot. It's not TV debates, it's not a tweet, it's not a mini protest in Jantar Mantar. It's also about delivery, dignity of life, or for example, like building of toilets for women. Democracy means more than that.
I think I will tell you the biggest problem, the way I see some of these studies, in fact, almost all these studies which have ranked, the methodology is that there is a uniform perception-based survey of a very small group of people. So you are not even attempting representation or any form of representative data, but it's all perception-based. And naturally, what will happen is, when you have governments which are, brought in largely on the vote of the poorest segments, the elite do see, they do sense, and they do go through slippage or losing the privilege and the patronage that they had in past regimes. So you're going to basically, through these surveys, showcase that. You're going to showcase the sense of frustration. You're going to showcase changing reality of the lives of these handful of experts who are questioned in the form of these perception-based surveys. But methodologically, I want to dwell a little bit on this, Karthik. I think people don't understand. How can you have the same methodology and with a very small sample trying to pick up what is the status of Indian democracy, where you have 900 million electors, where you have more than 100 spoken language. The Kingdom of Norway, 4 million people, 4 million electors. Now, you cannot have, it makes absolutely no econometric sense. Statistically, it's just nonsense. But, they continue to do those rankings and ratings. And this paper, I think, is an important attempt. Here, I'm trying to provide an alternate methodology. That, guys, instead of talking amongst yourself and crying about the loss of privilege, why don't you look at the data? Look at the objective data. And I'm not saying government data. Again, I want to reiterate, this is not administrative data. This is self-reported household level data. And that tells you, when it is 12 lakh households over 5 to 6 years timeline, you get a much, much clearer picture on what is happening. There is absolutely no discrimination by the administration in the day-to-day functioning, which is why I conclude that, this is not only a better way, but it gives us tremendous reassurance of something we have often felt, that there is the politics and the rhetoric, administration and governance on a day-to-day basis. The roots of democracy in India are very, very deep, and it's very healthy, as you can see in the day-to-day functioning and administration.
Professor Ravi, I'll just quote you, and I would like you to take us through. You write on the page number 2, in my opinion, as important as the abstract ideas of freedom of speech, expression, etc. are for the functioning of democracy, it is equally important to look at the responsiveness of the democratically elected government to the materialistic needs of the marginalized people across religions, social groups and geographies. If I take this concept further, the previous governments, their social justice platform was very, very sectional in nature. If you look at the governments in North Indian state, though they fought elections on social justice, it was sectional in nature. It left other communities out, saying that you have already got the fruits of Indian economy. But is it the different style of the Prime Minister's working which is being reflected in the data you are getting from the society? And it is this which the Western surveys fail to gauge, understand, that there is a tectonic shift in which the material and social prosperity is being passed through government policies?
I think there is a fundamental belief in the administration. And of course, I'm not speaking on behalf of anyone, but the more data I see and the more schemes I look at and the way they're getting implemented across the country, the more I feel that the philosophy underlying governance is that, basically, you are attempting to provide basic amenities to everyone, everywhere. As, the inspiration here is to instill a sense of dignity. Remember when toilets Swachh Bharat scheme was launched, the motivation was not, you were not looking at gender, safety, etc. The motivation was we wanted to be open defecation free. And you saw 100 million toilets getting built within the first few years itself. But the data, when you begin to look at what is the impact it has had on society, more than 20% reduction in crime against women, around 14% reduction in rapes. These are published works. These are data, empirical, rigorous studies that are all published in peer-reviewed journal internationally. So you see the basic belief that if you provide amenities and give dignity through these basic amenities, you are basically doing what the voters have voted you in power for. Remember, in a democracy, the weaker segments particularly, their expectation of the government is what? That you will free us from the daily drudgery of life. Electricity, water, toilets, telephone, right? Cooking gas, bank account. These are very, very fundamental amenities. And that is what I think the Modi administration is doing. It is absolutely meeting the expectations of the weaker segments of the society, and it is doing so with absolutely no discrimination. The administration is not biased in any discernible form. And we are sure of that because this is very large representative data and we find nothing. We find absolutely nothing. In fact, in certain areas, we find minorities doing marginally better. And all in all, there is a reason that this basically reaffirms what we have always known. And but if the experts are serious about doing assessments in the future, they should look at these methodologies rather than talking amongst themselves.
Madam, your paper says a secular democracy in practice, objective assessment of amenities programs in India. Doesn't it bust the myth, because the attack on the present government is that it's secular, it's not secular in nature, minorities are being treated differently, they have a differential way of being responded in by the government. But if you look at the programs, it reaches them, it benefits them, and there is no discrimination within the communities.
Yes. Karthikeya, this is you see what media picks up, the narratives which get created. There is a politics around all of this, but every time when an argument of this nature is made that, look, India is majoritarian, this government is majoritarian, etc., it's done on the back of anecdotes. Okay, that this particular person was badly treated, or I was treated badly, etc. The thing about anecdotes is that every anecdote can be matched by an equal and opposite anecdote, right? Which is why we lay greater faith in data and large representative data, because data is relatively much more objective than these anecdotes. And as I mentioned in the paper, and as you very nicely read out in the past, basically, the beauty of democracy and in the Indian democracy is that everyone has a vote. The poor are expecting something from the government. And no matter how shrill the politics of the elite and the experts, you're not going to be able to subvert the power of that, the voices of the bottom 20%. And the administration is absolutely responding to those expectations and doing so in ways which does not discriminate across religious, social, or geographic divisions.
Professor Ravi, you have looked into the data, which is, you say, based on nationally representative sample of more than 1.2 million households across 2015-16 and 2019-21. And you go on to say we do not find any evidence. What are the new challenges you have discovered? Because you have given the achievements. What do you think should be the third step now? Because you have spoken about the micro revolutions. These are the two phases you have studied. What are the challenges and what are the new milestones which can be achieved?
So Karthikeya, our development path, or providing amenities for long-term productivity gains and dignity of citizens, is a work in progress. We have done very well on some of these amenities, but we have a long way to go as far as pipe drinking water is concerned, as far as LPG is concerned. We have made a great beginning. So people are getting water on premises, but from there to piped drinking water will take some time, and not time, it will take resources. So I think the paper very clearly highlights it's not all that we have achieved saturation and we are all gung-ho about it. No, there's absolutely no, we are not blinded. The data is very clear. It tells us that as far as certain amenities, we look at 6 in particular, that we are doing very well on most of them, but there do remain challenges, and pipe drinking water and LPG, etc. So clean cooking fuel, these are work in progress. We have still some way to go. On several counts of making affordable healthcare available locally, we have some way to go. We have some way to go as far as quality of education, skilling is concerned. And these are all, these are agendas which are unfolding through your various means, etc. Not all of it is very easy to measure because the data allow to do some things and not everything else. But in the paper, we do identify where is it that we are still lagging. But this is not a paper about how much we have achieved as far as saturation is concerned. Please do not confuse. So it does give you information that how we are doing in terms of how the households are reporting whether they have access to amenities. It is more about when amenities are getting available to the poorest, is there any discernible discrimination? The work in progress is a work in progress for all segments of the society.
And Professor,
it remains as much a challenge for the minority as the social groups or geographic clusters.
Couple of micro questions, which really caught my eye, because if we just confine it to the minorities or Muslims, I think it would be travesty of the work you have done. If we look at the data in context of access to mobile phone, the scheduled tribe and scheduled caste have done exceptionally well. It's 35%. How has this happened in context of mobile phones? Because if you look at the LPG, in context of scheduled tribe, it's only 1%. In terms of mobile connectivity, they have done well. So the scheduled caste, scheduled tribes are doing well on different parameters. So what explains this difference?
So a lot of it, Kartikeya, should be understood as, when the basic architecture of Jan Dhan, Aadhaar and mobile was set up within the first 5 years of the Modi administration, Jan Dhan and Aadhaar happened on the back of government initiative, government drive. But mobile telephony expanded in India on the back of private enterprise, right? Because our public telecom providers, they're limited in their outreach. And the minute when you had telecom reforms in the last 20 years, you've had a major expansion of telephony happening. However, in the last 6 or 7 years, it is on account of new entrants. It has been on account of very low charges, very low data prices, etc. That you are seeing this expand a lot to the northeast, by the way, and parts of the country which were relatively underconnected even 6-7 years back. And
LPG looks a little challenging area, but in context of bank accounts, electricity, it's a runway success. It's like 77% for the minority community in bank accounts, 71% in electricity. But in terms of LPG, I think the ST and SCs, I think they require a bigger push. What sort of push you think is required?
I think as far as administration is concerned, the targets aren't so much in terms of we have to meet so many minority groups, we have to meet so many SC/ST. That's not how administration, I think, functions. When the administration, either it is to marketed groups by geographies, or it is by weaker segments. So we have economically weaker segments, which is again why we focus on the bottom 20% or the the bottom quintile of the population. LPG, remember, is a costlier. It is it is clean cooking fuel, trying to move people away from using firewood and coal, dung, etc., which are hugely polluting. And in fact, the one study which came out early on is that because pollution affects women more, they are the ones who cook. Availability of LPG led to improvement in the lung health of women. So we know that even with limited improvement in access, which is what you're seeing in terms of cooking LPG, cooking gas, the expansion is far from where we want it to be. But even this increase in access is having very significant and profound long-term impact on health and well-being of women in particular.
And before I start winding up the interview, what are the challenges you see on the water and the premises? Because the data shows that the achievements are exceptional. They have gone up, but with climate change, global warming, with high heat in the Himalayas, don't you think that this is really going to be the most challenging aspect of the sixth point of your survey, before the conclusion, which is water security?
The water security, I think, is a huge concern, and you are seeing that in a lot of our conversations, including in the G20 conversations, etc. But remember, from where we are starting out, Karthikeya, just having access to water in the premises, which means it's around where you live. It's like a first step. So, the conversations on water security, while it is a paramount and it's happening in terms of wastage and, the future supply and what kind of cost structures we are going to be battling with. In the Indian case, just having access to water on premises, it's like a first step to attaining, basic, again, access. So, when we talk about climate change, and in fact, you should also think of, in terms of agriculture, one of the reasons why millets is getting the kind of push in the whole mission, millet mission, is water is a very large part of it, because millets are almost 6 times as water efficient as wheat, for instance, and not even rice. I'm talking about wheat. So there is a great degree of sensibility as far as policy making in improving access to water is concerned, because we are worried that while we want to give water to everybody, it has to be done in a way that you're not distorting the water market, or you're not distorting the supply in such a way that it leads to tremendous wastage and way of life which is unsustainable moving forward. But access to water on premises is a basic necessity.
And Professor Ravi,
we're seeing
yes,
excellent improvement in the last few years.
And my last question to you is, do you think that the real reason why the Western press, or I would say the woke crowd, which really fails to understand the functioning of the Indian democracy, anyway you have busted the myth through the data, is because they mistake our democracy in context of equity with TV debates and elections?
Karthikeya, they talk to their friends and they're talking to a very small group of experts. And these are experts who, most of them, it's the lack of transparency and the unscientific nature of these exercises, which make them at some level ridiculous. But I think the media gives them certain credibility by treating them as objective truth, and therefore you tend to blow it up and have too many conversations around. As an economist and as an empiricist, let me tell you, they're utter rubbish. It's just, it's like a drawing room conversation in parts of Delhi where, you meet friends who are all, they had patronage from past establishment and past governance, and now they're just unhappy. And then because the patronage has been taken away, the privileges have been taken away. And so their unhappiness cannot be equated with Indian democracy. Right?
Absolutely.
And that is why the need for more objectivity and greater show of that objectivity. I think we have to show people that this is the kind of work that the administration is able to accomplish. This is what the expectations of the poor are. And quite theoretically, I think we have to push back against this small clique which keeps coming back in different ratings and different rankings and trying to pull the democracy down. Even on the gender front, for instance, we say that globally, the conversation is democracy in recession since 2006. Except when you look at Indian democracy, you have massive rise in women voters making an impact where political parties are responding to them in the provision of public goods. So our democracy is going from strength to strength, whether we're talking about women, we are talking about women's vote, whether it matters, we're talking about the bottom 20%, so the weakest and sort of the most vulnerable segments of our society. There is absolutely no discrimination as far as administration is concerned, number one. Number two, massive increase in amenities, which means improvements in dignity and basic quality of life of the weakest segments of our society. Now, none of this is showcased when you talk to 25, 30 people, which is usually the sample size, who tend to be friends and relatives and chums of people who have lost privilege. So we cannot equate those two. So there is an econometric analysis and a sort of a criticism for what those methodologies try and achieve. in equating India 900 million and Norway 400 million, Kingdom of Norway, with Indian democracy. It's laughable. But while I can do that as an economist, I think it's very important to look at the data and show to people what is the work that is being achieved. And also, I think it is publicly available data. So there is also an encouragement to one and all, whoever wants to study Indian democracy, these are publicly available, easily available data sets. Kindly look at the data, try to bring in more objectivity into your arguments rather than fretting over lost privileges.
No, I think your data is pretty clear because data takes the 20% of the poorest households, number one. It's a publicly available data. It's not something which has been secretly manufactured. And third, I think the narrative builders against the Indian state, and I'm not using the word Indian government, I think India, that there is a problem with India. I think your data utterly refutes that, and I think brings into question, which is very close to my heart, and on that I will conclude, that democracy is not only about elections, it's about equity, it's about equality, it's about your basic access to resources, it's also about social democracy, and I would again say for the third time, which Baba Sahib Ambedkar spoke about, it's about economic equality, it's about economic democracy. And I think what the India baiters really get wrong is that democracy is not just about shouting. Democracy is about a conversation, it's about ensuring that the poor gets the benefit without money being wasted on the way. In 80s, one of our prime ministers said only 10 paisa goes. At least today, proud Indian can say that more than 90% is going to the poorest poor. And I think your data, or the data which has come from the set of tools available in public and figures available in public, actually proves that. Thank you so much, Professor Ravi, for making time for this special edition of News 9 Live. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Namaste.